Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraformer. We had our very first ever Azure Terraformer members only meetup. This was a meetup open to all Azure Terraformer members. Basically, if you join the channel at whatever membership level, you get an exclusive invitation to events like this. Now it is pretty hard to get everybody together spanning so many time zones, but I think we had folks in the US, the UK, and Singapore pretty evenly distributed. But it was a great time. We did a round of introductions, followed by QA, and then I raffled off prizes. Of course, using the random provider from Terraform to help me keep it fair. During introductions, I asked each member to answer 3 questions. What's your favorite Azure service and why? Besides the Azure RM provider, what's your favorite Terraform provider? Or the Terraform provider that you most commonly use? And the last question, if you could describe your Terraform journey in one word, what would it be? This sparked some great conversations before we moved into the broader Q&A, where we talked about different work that each of us has been doing with Terraform recently. At the end, I used a little bit of Terraform code to raffle off a couple of exquisite prizes, including a Microsoft Azure branded mirror metallic water bottle. It's one that I have personally, and I absolutely love it. Really good build quality, and it's got the Azure logo. Another option was a signed copy of my newest book, Mastering Terraform. And then the last option was an invitation to the Microsoft Employee Company Store via the Friends and Family Benefit Program. You had to be present to win. You'll have to wait and see to the end who actually won and who missed out. If you are a member of this channel, thank you so much for your support. If you didn't get to join us this time, make sure you hop on the Discord server and verify yourself to me, and I'll put you in the right group so you can get access to these events in the future. I do plan on giving out prizes like this, just as a sign of appreciation to those folks that choose to support me. If you're not a channel member, as I say, consider announcing to the world your status as an official Azure Terraformer by joining the channel. There's also additional membership levels of Code Ninja, which grants you exclusive access to me to conduct a code review. Just open a GitHub pull request, assign it to me, and we'll work a little bit more closely together on your code. The next level is called my Inner Circle, which grants you exclusive access to yours truly, 1 hour a month, to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Think of it as a cloud architecture, DevOps, software engineering retainer for 1 hour of consultation a month. Anyways, really good conversation today. Without further ado, let's check it out.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can hear you. How about you?
Perfect. Loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Congratulations for your book.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's been a long time coming, let me tell you.
Amazing. Nowadays, certain people have the time to sit down and write books. Yeah. It's short blogs, those type of things. Yeah.
Yep.
It's good.
Yeah, it was a lot of weekends, let me tell you.
Oh, okay. Your day job in Microsoft is probably busy enough. Yeah.
Indeed. It's quite busy. Especially been busy recently with the all the security stuff that we've been doing. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a teammate. My teammate is also from Microsoft. He was from Microsoft Singapore.
Cool.
And now we are doing Terraform for Azure day in, day out. But it has been like 3 years project. The initial design wasn't very good, so a lot of technical dates. Yeah. It's quite a painful project.
Yep, that's too bad.
How about your traveling? Are you
What's that?
traveling? Are you traveling again very soon?
Yeah, I'll be popping into China here pretty soon. There's Dan Kitch. What's up, Dan Kitch?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Good.
I can't see you. Well, I mean, I see a little bubble that kind of like, pulsates when you talk, but it's fine. You don't have to come on.
Nope.
You don't have to come on vid.
Lock screen.
It's up to you if you want to come on vid. We are recording, so. Let's see here. I'm just wrapping. I'm trying to get like the intro questions You know, or like since this is the first ever Azure Terraformer meetup, I've got some icebreakers, you know, so we can introduce ourselves and answer some questions to get things rolling. Let me see here. Yeah, that's a good one. See if some people trickle in here. There were some late breaking new members. Scrambler, I see you got in. All right. You there, Scrambler? You figuring out your audio video?
No, the video.
There he is, Gregory Mirsky. How are you doing, man?
Doing good. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. So don't mind the hovel behind me. It's my lab.
It's awesome. I love it. Scrambler's having AV issues. No worries, man. We got a minute. We'll see if we can get a few more peeps on here. So yeah, I'm gonna hold off until we get everybody on here. We have about 9 members right now. So thank you guys so much for your support. Really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. I mean, it's not my path to early retirement, so, but I appreciate it. It does overcome some of the costs of like me doing my videos, like leaving Kubernetes clusters online and stuff like that, which I'm getting better at. Yeah, that's I don't get paid to do this. It's just kind of fun and trying to help people. So appreciate you guys supporting me in this way. And I set this up to get to know you guys a little bit better and maybe give back a little bit. I got a fun little HCL piece of code that we're going to use to generate winners for some prizes that I have picked out for you. And so yeah. Now, Richard, we're gonna have to figure out the shipping if you win one of these things.
Electrically,
What's that?
by video, by electrically.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
It'll just be the perfect excuse for you to go to Singapore.
Yeah, carrying my carry-on luggage. No, Singapore has a really, I mean, I follow them on LinkedIn and their hug is like just off the charts. Like, I mean, it seems like they're really professionally done and they have really nice office space and they have pretty huge turnout. Are you active in the hug over there in Singapore?
I will be joining. Yeah, still haven't got the time. Yes.
I got you. Okay. Well, I'd say let's get started. I don't know if we're gonna have anybody else join. Maybe Scrambler will get his AV figured out, but let me see if I can share my window or my screen. Might be kind of big. I guess I could always yeah, let's try that. So here we go. So agenda-wise, why don't we start with introductions? Maybe go around the room. You can share your name. Last name's optional. Of course, some of you guys already have your last names on there, but you're not shy. That's cool. I'm not shy either. Little questions that I thought might be fun. What's your favorite Azure service and why? Other than Azure RM, what's your next favorite Terraform provider and why? It could be one of those utility providers. Okay, it doesn't have to be that other Azure provider. so I'm not trying to push anybody in a direction, but and maybe favorite or most often used Terraform provider other than Azure RM. That might be interesting. It might be different answers there. And then if you could describe your Terraform journey in one word, what would it be? That's it. So who wants to, like, should we just go down, like, who wants to go first?
I'll go first, so I can leave early. All right. My name is Richard. I'm based in Singapore. Very nice to meet you guys. It's local time 10 p.m. plus. Yeah. The Azure favorite service has to be AD or AAD, those type of things. This is something very unique. Even when I was working on heavily AWS, on the authentication part is still using the AD, single sign-on, or those. Yeah. Terraform RM provider. I'm using something to generate the time, the date. That's one of those. Because we have this encryption key, and initially people just hard code those expire day 1 year into the Terraform code. And when the next guy do it, he just copy and paste. Then we realize the expire day is getting shorter and shorter until only a few months left. So yeah, now we start using the date to generate. Describe the Terraform journey. Well, to me, I came from an electrical EE background, so I'm not a coder. But I came from heavily infrastructure, but now infrastructure as code, so I need to move on to code. And one word to me, honestly, is painful. Yeah, that's why I signed on this channel. I can say how painful that is. We have an intern who is a computer science graduate coming in. When he joined us, he didn't know anything about Terraform. I have been working on Terraform on and off for 3 years now, from AWS, GCP, and now Azure. Just 3 weeks later, that intern beat me. So that's how painful it can be. Yeah, back to you guys. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, this is a very nice community. When I get stuck, I come to this Discord, ask question. Yeah, definitely I'll get something from that. Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thanks for sharing. Definitely the time provider can be useful. It definitely can be tricky, and it makes me a little bit scared when I use it, especially for like cert expiration and things like that. You definitely need a lot of discipline, like if you're working with stuff like that, to make that automated. So definitely requires a lot of thought. AAD, Azure AD, as it will forever be known to me, at least. Now known as Entra ID. Yeah, man, that's definitely one of our superpowers. It's interesting. Like on AWS, it's almost like monolithic. Like IAM is just like one of AWS's services. On Azure, it's its own control plane, which has interesting like power to it, but also has interesting complexity that it also adds. But I do like that it's somewhat decoupled from Azure, in the sense that you could just like all day long, you could just do Entra or Azure AD without touching Azure proper, so to speak. But whereas AWS IAM, it's all tightly coupled in there. So yeah, good answers. Painful. I think we've all been there. So especially managing production systems. I mean, it's a way different than the greenfield Contoso hello world, just shoot it up in the cloud kind of thing. So feel you totally. Dan, you want to go next?
Yeah. Favorite service. Logic apps, probably. I'll say logic apps.
That's spicy. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Excited about talking about that.
Well, we've been doing a lot of integration with different SaaS applications recently and being able to hook into them using logic apps has been quite a nice experience. And, provisioning those through Terraform has made that a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. That's why I thought it was a bit spicy, because I've always found it very difficult to automate logic apps with Terraform.
Yes, well, yeah, it gets to a point where it can be quite. I think it is very rewarding once you sort of set up, once you've got everything in place. Getting it set up can be quite tedious initially. But once they're sort of set up, replicating those across multiple environments is rock solid. It's very nice, especially when you look at the consumption-based logic apps. Yeah.
Cool. It kind of sounds like it might be similar to how I've used Grafana, because Grafana is very ClickOps oriented, right? So I would imagine people that are maintaining the logic app.
It's designing your workflow obviously in the GUI, and then exporting that as JSON and then using Terraform to provision that. It's very nice. It's a very nice sort of release pipeline as well for those. Using GitHub Actions, it all fits in, quite nicely.
Yeah, it sounds very similar.
Other than Azure RM, what's your favorite Terraform provider? Probably Azure AD, actually.
Oh.
It's probably the first Azure provider that I used with Terraform, because we've done a lot of conditional access policies and deploying conditional access using the Azure AD provider. I don't think it gets enough credit, actually, the Azure AD provider.
Definitely one of those unsung heroes for sure.
Yeah. One word to describe the Terraform journey: addictive.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Very addictive. Very addictive. I mean, well, when I first started out with Terraform, this was way back when I was doing vSphere provisioning, virtual machines on the vSphere, using that provider. And then naturally, as we sort of migrated, to the cloud, I was using Azure, we started, then to sort of experiment with the Azure RM provider. But yeah, first started out with vSphere. But yeah, very addictive, very, very addictive.
Yeah, definitely.
Painful as well, yeah. Don't get me wrong, can be.
I can relate. Like when I first started, it's like the power that you feel like you have, in terms of making something repeatable. It's like I want to do that to everything. So
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
I definitely get that addictive aspect of it for sure. Yeah, cool. Gregory.
All right. My name's Gregory Mursky, as you can tell. I'm not shy. I'm actually based here on Long Island, New York. So my favorite Azure service, I really don't have one because I'm mainly an AWS guy, just getting into Azure. So I've dabbled with, logic apps and all kinds of other fun stuff. Kind of more getting into, I guess, maybe the AKS part of it. But right now I have a production area that rolled their own Kubernetes cluster, and now I'm trying to get them onto a standardized Kubernetes before we can get them onto AKS. Other than Azure RM, my favorite Terraform provider is actually the Snowflake provider. I'm also the Snowflake admin here too. So I wear many hats, and as you can tell by the lack of hair, I change them very often. So, wow. And I guess my Terraform journey in one word would be long. I've been using Terraform probably I guess conservatively, I'd say 0.11, but probably started with 0.7, 0.9. So, yeah, I've been there. I've seen it grow. I've seen it change. I've seen it, morph. Just amazed at how flexible the product is.
So was that you probably been using it longer than I have. Was that prior to when they broke out the providers into their own plugins?
They were just starting to do that. They had done that I think in 7. The course that I had taken with Edward Vian on Udemy, he was using 7 and 9 for it, and I had 11 installed at the time. So it was like he mentioned that there are different ways that they're changing stuff, and yeah, so I've seen a lot of stuff kind of come and go and change, and there are some frustrating things like certain parts of Terraform you couldn't use a variable, where it's like this would be a perfect place to put a variable. Even validation, it was like, why did validation take so long to go into Terraform? So
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, like outside, like it felt like we were kind of handcuffed for many years, like just with such basic validation. Just I mean, from an app dev background, it's like literally the drag and drop validation that you get out of the toolbox. It's like no custom validation at all, really. So it's very, very primitive when you can only apply regex or simple range validation, essentially. Yeah, no, I'm super jazzed about the input variable validation feature. That's just going to open up so many possibilities of just making better modules. So.
Even though I said Snowflake's sort of my favorite Terraform provider, other than AWS and Azure, there are still a lot of warts with that one also. I mean, that provider was originally created by the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. HashiCorp kind of took it over, standardized it a little. But again, the problem is that you make a minor change to a table, it won't alter it. It will just destroy it and rebuild it. And if you have data there, it's like, okay, you got to make sure that before you apply anything in Terraform, everything's all backed up, and figure out how to reload it and stuff like that. So it can be a bear sometimes. Most of my developers, we use schema change to do a lot of that for their development. So I wish I could use more Terraform and Snowflake, but unfortunately we can't.
So does the Snowflake provider at least tell you when it's going to do a resource replacement, or?
Yeah, you got to watch the documentation.
Ooh,
it's
wow.
Pretty much they say that if you're adding a column or renaming something, it won't apply an alter. It will just drop and rebuild, and so.
Does it use kind of a schema based, like a JSON based schema, kind of like the AZ? Are you familiar with the AZ API provider?
Not really. I've been looking at it because I'm starting to dabble in it. So.
Oh, okay. Well, now Amazon has the Cloud CC provider, which is basically the same thing, as I understand. Which basically you get one resource, and then you use the whatever schema that is emitted by the Open API spec from AWS or Azure. Whatever the payload is, you got one resource, and you can provision any resource type on it.
Yeah, that's kind of a concerning issue with Terraform, because it seems that the cloud providers are doing an end run around a lot of the resources in Terraform, to a point that you're starting to see, even in AWS, some of it lagging behind the API. Oh, so if I need to do this, I got to go use the API instead of the actual Terraform provider command for whatever. And you're going to start seeing more and more of that, because they're not going to devote the resources. And unless the open source community can really step up, that's something that I think is kind of something that might be detrimental in the long run to Terraform.
Yeah, I share your concern with that. I know many of my colleagues at Microsoft are really gung ho about the AZ API provider, and they've been really promoting it. But I just I have concerns, kind of like you. It's like, well, kind of the similar experience you have with Snowflake. If I give it like a JSON payload, um, if it's just blindly accepting that, I'm totally at the mercy of the resource provider, whether that thing gets deleted or recreated and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I guess like if they can assure, if I can be like assured that the plan is going to tell me that that thing's going to get replaced, then it doesn't matter. Like it's a big nothing burger. But I don't see how that's possible yet, unless those kind of indicators are surfaced as metadata within the Open API spec to say, hey, this attribute actually triggers a drop create, but I don't think that exists yet. But yeah, that's definitely my concern. And if it almost seems like it's like the cloud providers like it because it's like, yeah, we get day zero support. We don't have a lot of effort to develop the human curated providers, but you lose some of that like magic in a bottle that Terraform has, where it kind of smooths out those like idiosyncrasies of each service.
You also lose a lot of the documentation aspects of Terraform too, because the JSON input for the API is not as apparent as the HashiCorp language. You can see that, okay, this is, the resource group, it becomes very terse and in more cases verbose too, because the
Definitely.
JSON is way more verbose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's it's like expediency versus like the creature comforts that we get with the human intelligence curated versions of the Azure RM or the AWS provider. I wonder, like, I don't know, maybe AI will solve this ultimately. Like if like Devin, they can throw Devin at it eventually, and kind of automate, because it is like I've done development on the providers. I don't know if you guys have. I haven't done a whole lot, but like you do feel like you're doing a lot of plumbing in terms of just like mapping, defining a resource schema, and then just mapping, to a REST API call, doing validation, logic and things like that. It's not super sophisticated code. There's just a whole lot of it. That's the problem. So, but it is nice when there's thought put into it, which you don't get with those dynamic generated providers, at least not yet. Yeah. So you've been doing this a long time. I was not aware until I think recently I was chatting with somebody. Maybe I was chatting with Ned about it, but I was blown away that like Terraform for a long time, relatively speaking, I guess, just had basically had all the providers built into the core CLI. And I guess I've always taken it for granted. I started using it apparently after they had broken those up into different provider plugins. And I've always taken it for granted that it was like this strategy pattern, implementation where you have a different provider that encapsulates it. Looking at how big the Azure RM provider and the AWS provider are, like already like the bloat is very real in those providers. I can't imagine, the days when like everything was just jammed into the core CLI.
I think if my senile brain is actually serving me correctly, I think a lot of it was accomplished between 11 and 13. So.
Interesting. Yeah. So, so you guys want to talk about stuff you're working on, or any questions or points of interest that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I mean, I'll go first. I already mentioned what I'm kind of working on. Like I said, I have a development area that rolled its own Kubernetes in Azure. It's pretty basically monolithic. And again, it's just a security nightmare because it was like, just put up machines and install, hand roll the Kubernetes and whatever. So I've been using Terraform and a lot of Ansible at the same time, configuring RKE2, which is the government version of K3S, which is just a different distribution of Kubernetes, and building an RKE2 cluster because it's FIPS compliant out of the box. So every time our security department runs a whiz scan against it, I'm like, hey, look, it's FIPS compliant. What do you want more out of it? And again, it's at least standardized, and then we can have, discussions with them to eventually move them over to Azure. Our biggest problem is I work for a joint venture that was in a larger company, and that larger company got bought by another company, and our Azure tenant is shared and very locked down. So I can't even, build the VNet. Can't even ask for a service principal. So it's like, I've got both hands and a foot tied behind my back, and I'm just kind of hopping along. So, so it's, it requires some real creative energies and stuff. But I've done, things like, I think I had posted on the Discord on my GitHub account is a AWS to Azure VPN, where, we were moving stuff over and how to provision it, and, get the machines talking to each other. So that is interesting. The Azure VPN service is notoriously slow. It can take up to 45, 50 minutes.
Oh yeah. I thought you were talking about like provisioning time is like slow. I thought you were talking about like actual like data transfer rates like on it. But yeah.
No, the actual building with Terraform, it takes up to 45, 50 minutes for the Azure side to come up. Meanwhile, 15 minutes later, the AWS side's up and going, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, I've had similar experience with that, provisioning VPNs attached to VNets. I think Dan's working on some VPN stuff as well. But like point to site in a VNet or point to site, even in a VWAN, it's very slow. But that's one of the considerations, that I always use when trying to decide how to segment my infrastructure, right? I mean, VPN by itself has a massive impact if you lose that. So it's one of those areas, when you consider the fingerprints on it, like you don't want people touching that a lot. You don't want a lot of churn in there. So that in its own right, it's a good idea to carve it out and like put it over there. So like it's out of the way. People don't kick it. But then
it's also very expensive too.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And I feel like that's why vWAN would be a more ideal solution, because vWAN lets you kind of sprinkle that across a broader network. For a while, I was popping out VPNs that were VNet attached, and like every environment we had a VPN attached to it, and a different VPN. I was just like, wow, we're spending a lot of money on these VPNs. If we just create a shared vWAN, route all the point to site connectivity through that one VPN, and that VNet, it's attached to a vHub, then everybody can get to wherever they need to go. But yeah, it's cost, provisioning time, and just critical infrastructure. Definitely good reasons to carve it out into its own deployment. Dan, were you going to pop on there? I'm sorry, man.
No, not on. I've had experience with setting up the VPN gateways before, so I can feel your pain. Not something that I'm working on currently, but yeah, I can feel the pain, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, the AWS to Azure, when I was down in Australia, there were some folks at some Azure Terraformers that came up to me after my talk, and they were particularly interested in AWS to Azure migration. And of course, that's music to my ears, right? But love when that happens. But yeah, so that's definitely something that looking to see what I can do from a content creation standpoint. But yeah, those migration scenarios are particularly difficult to recreate real world, unless you got like a massive budget. So that's
Biggest problem
yeah.
with migration is that people think that they're going to do it all in one fell swoop, and there's always something that gets stuck behind in the legacy account, and that's why I had to create the VPN. Was that they couldn't move stuff out of AWS because it was dependent upon an outside vendor, and they couldn't they had to keep it in AWS for like 6 months longer, but the rest of the systems are all in Azure, and they need to talk to that one system that's marooned, and that's So
Yep.
I've done a lot of data center migrations back in the day. I mean, I've been in IT for over 40 years. I think I've been in every discipline, and used to do physical data center moves too. Everything from lift and shift, where you threw it in the truck and hope the server started up in the new location, to VMware, where it was like, oh, VM move is so wonderful,
Yeah. V2V.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started my corporate career racking and stacking servers, so definitely was there. I was at a financial institution, and I'm probably dating myself. Of course, financial institutions, they probably still have this hardware running in production anyway. But they used to have this huge like wall of tapes where they had those mechanical arms that would go pull them.
Yep, the silos. Yep.
Yeah, I always thought that was like the coolest thing, but probably, I mean, these days, not the most sexy thing, probably pretty prone to error, but.
I've worked in financial and almost every industry too. And I think with this CloudStrike problem, the idea was back when we had lots of colos. A lot of companies, especially financial companies, always ran with an A and B model where, half the data center was in one colo and the other half was in another colo with different equipment, different software, just in case something like this would have taken it down. And I think with the outage from CloudStrike on Azure at the point in time, I think you're starting to see a lot of people starting to talk about going back to that A and B type model, where they're going to want to have, half in AWS, half in Azure, some in GCP and stuff like that. And I think if anybody could think of a way to have a generic Terraform and then just say, okay, put up a VM in GCP and one VM in AWS and just genericize it, I think they'd probably have a great product and boost Terraform at the same time.
Yeah. I've thought about like modules like that where, I mean, if basically you would need to drop it down to the lowest common denominator between the platforms that you're trying to support. But if you imagine like the input variables at the top, would be like tied to a SKU. I guess maybe nowadays with input variable validation, and these the Cloud CC and the AZ API provider, where you can actually look up, it might be a little bit more possible now, because you're like, oh yeah, it's almost like the vSphere days, where it's like, I want this many CPUs and this much RAM, right? What do you got? And then we can just pick the SKU from a known good list in region. And then of course that'll show up in plan, right? So it's not like you're just like trusting that we're not going to pick something with 64 gigs of GPU or something. But
I think with the primitives in all the cloud providers, virtual machines, storage, basic networking, that is probably the easiest thing. Once you start getting into the cloud provider specific services, such as, AWS Lambda or into Azure functions and stuff, that's where you're going to start having your issues there. But, it's a starting point. This is actually a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime you're interfacing with the API directly, you'd almost need a software library that would do the transformation. Hey, see you, Richard. Thanks for joining, man. Cheers. Yeah, like SQS or Azure Q Storage, right? I mean, you'd have to. I mean, the SDK is totally different for those. Now, when there's parity, right? Like if you're using Postgres or if you're using Kafka, MongoDB, like when there's a standard protocol that you use, then that kind of goes away. And it does seem like we're moving in that direction, right? Like you see Cosmos DB. And I think the same thing's happening on the AWS side, where there are standard protocols for event-driven, systems or document databases. Like they're moving away from proprietary protocols, using, the common tongue, the common language, so to speak. But then underneath the hood, it's doing whatever they want it to do, right?
Yeah.
On that platform, which I think is a pretty cool trend. It's been happening for many years now. But
yeah, I think cloud services ultimately within probably the next 5 years will probably become commodities, just like servers were. People were diehard Compaq or Dell aficionados. Now it's like, okay, who's got the resources and the latency and the price I want to run at?
Yeah, and I think that's why you see the hyperscalers continue to try and, one up each other in terms of like moving higher and higher up the stack towards the application code.
Yeah.
To kind of counteract that commoditization. But that, you're absolutely right. I mean, that it's almost like, like a utility. Like when you get to the bare bones platform, it's more like a utility than it is, like an SDK or something like that. But how are we on time here? Well, we got a lot of time. It's just us, so the prizes are going to go fast. So that'll be interesting. Let me show you the code. I worked this out where calculating a winner, I set a keepers trigger based on timestamp to just auto refresh it. And I set up an input map of the members and then the code ninjas so that I could, add, basically like it's a raffle, right? And every member gets their name dropped into the hat one time for every month that they're a member, because I'm trying to like I don't know, give reward the longer the folks that have been supporting longer, but also keep it kind of equitable for everybody. And then Code Ninjas, they get 3 entries for every month of their membership. So I got this set up here. So I pulled these from the members. Some folks that have been around quite a while. Dan Kitch, locking in 8 months, man. Thank you so much.
That's gone quick.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it has. I look at my LinkedIn profile and I guess I've been doing this for a year and 7 months, which is pretty wild. And Gregory, 5 months, coming up on the half year, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support. Got
to find time to get involved in Code Ninjas. It's just, I'm trying.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm just trying to make it like new levels of engagement. Like if we want to do more collaborative coding, I think Dan's largely been taking advantage of it more than anybody else. Sending me those PR requests.
Yes.
So love it. Keep it coming. Actually, the video where I review your code, Dan, of the most recent one is going to drop tomorrow. So that's
all right. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. Dan's doing a multi subscription hub and spoke network. So
Wow.
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah, so that'll be pretty fun. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a win-win. It keeps me on my toes because I'm looking at stuff that I probably wouldn't look at otherwise. Of course, hub and spoke, I do have personal experience with that with vWAN. That's where my love for vWAN came from. But Dan, your first one was Azure AD.
Conditional access. Yeah, the conditional access policies was the first.
Yeah, the conditional access policies.
Code review. Yeah.
Which that was that was fun too. But yeah. So what are you working on, Dan? You talk logic apps, right? Are you working on logic apps?
Yeah, logic apps is that's what's taking up a lot of my time at the minute. However, I have just started creating modules for some of our sort of common Azure resources that we deploy, and I'm hosting them in our GitHub organization, so that folk can sort of use the GitHub the source for the module. So that's quite nice. I'm enjoying doing that, creating these modules and hosting them in our GitHub organization. Each module is sort of set out into its own repository, just for sort of that independent version control, really. But it's nice just being able to reference using the GitHub as the source for the module, and keeping that private within our GitHub organization. So busy doing that, enjoying that in a minute. Been a long time coming. We're always spinning up resources on the fly, ad hoc. There wasn't really any structure to anything that was spin up. So we're just trying to sort of take the same approach, like the Azure verified modules, for example, and try to bring that sort of in-house, set them like a private organization, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So these each logic app has its own repo that you basically maintain it from?
For the current logic apps, it's actually that the purpose of the logic app that we have at the minute is for our joiners, movers, leavers process, and this will automate onboarding of employees, offboarding, things like that. So it's one deployment that consists of multiple logic apps, but they're deployed to multiple environments: dev, UAT, production. That's a combination of the Azure RM provider and the AZ API provider. It's quite nice. Like I said before, it's quite fiddly at first to get the baseline set up and having things in the right order. And there is a limitation where when you are working with logic apps and you're working with the API connections, those API connections have to be authorized. And this is where it sort of separates the two components. You have to authorize these API connections. Within the GUI. I believe you can do it with PowerShell. I think you can do it with PowerShell, but there is that sort of break in the deployment. It's almost like a two-stage deployment where you deploy the API connection that your logic app is using, but then that API connection will need authorizing within the portal, if you will, to then be able to use it. But once that's set up, it's rock solid. And being able to deploy these complex logic apps, just through that GitHub Actions and across multiple environments, it really is very sort of rewarding, because there was a time where we were trying to, we were creating these logic apps in the GUI, in the dev environment, and then we would come to recreate them, in the UAT environment, it's all ClickOps again, and it's prone to error. So, to be able to repeat that, it's very nice.
Especially when those logic apps get they grow organically. We had some logic apps, and logic apps tend to start like that. It's like, oh, I just want to do this tiny little thing. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's really nice. That's working great. Let me go add this to it.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And it's just like, it just snowballs, and you're like, oh my
snowballs. Yeah.
What the hell is this thing?
This is one of the joiners process that we've been automating. They started off with 4 actions. I think it's 150 actions in there now.
Did you say 50 or 450?
Well, 150.
150.
Probably more than that. Actually, it's just it grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, and the ClickOps experience, while it is really cool, it does not lend itself to breeding good development habits, because it's just as easy to if you're querying a database, we use Kusto or Azure Data Explorer a lot.
Yeah.
If you're going to go query a Kusto cluster, it's just as, I guess it's probably easier just to copy pasta the query into the logic app than it is to go actually create a function in the ADX cluster and then call the function. So what we ended up having was, we saw a lot of people just copy pasta the query, literally multi-line, huge queries into the logic app. And as you can imagine, it will just explodes from there in terms of complexity. Where somebody just changes one little comma or one little close parentheses, and then the whole thing just borks. So it's very painful. But so the API connections with authZ, are you using the AZ API provider to do a I've been using this but I've been using the getters to get geographies and crap like that out of the Azure control plane. Are you doing the AZ API resource action to do a put or a post to set up those API connections?
No, those API connections are actually provisioned through the Azure RM providers. The Azure RM API connection.
Oh, so they already have a resource within the Azure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then what do you use the API provider for?
Oh, that's for the actual bump for the logic app. So the resource, I found that it was tricky to work with there is a Azure RM workflow, I believe, for the logic apps that you can use. But it was, I think, per action. It was a resource per action, I believe, in the logic app. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to have a look. But I found it was easier to use the Azure API resource, the Microsoft.logic resource, and then provide that with a JSON payload, if you will, of the actual code of the logic app. A lot cleaner in the code as well. There's one resource that represents the logic app, and then you pass in a template file, which is the actual logic app code definition, if you will.
Which is just JSON schema, I presume.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the technique I used for Grafana and creating Grafana Dash, because with Grafana, we went through a ClickOps process where we'd have these data wizards go into Grafana, they'd connect all the data sources and then create all these queries and dashboards and stuff, and then we would export that as JSON. But then it became very brittle because there's certain things you wanted to be dynamic, like the data sources, right? Which I would imagine Logic Apps probably has a similar thing, where you're going to automatically provision those API connectors or data sources that you want your Logic Apps to talk to. So those aren't going to be necessarily hard coded, unless I guess.
Yeah, no, that's it. This is where there's a trade-off between a lot of it is using parameters within the logic app. So it's a trade-off between, it's finding that right balance, really. I think if you, to be able to, in some of your actions in the logic app, you do need to be able to, you want to be able to dynamically reference certain input parameters. And I think that's where using parameters and variables comes into it. But when you've got lots of them, it can be quite, it does start to get a bit messy. So it's sort of finding that right balance, if you will. I mean, I'd be happy to share the structure of this, so you can sort of see the layout and the approach.
Yeah, would love to, because it might help me overcome my fear of logic apps. I've always kind of avoided that. I'm like, if I stumble across a logic app, I'm like, we're converting this into a C# function. Like that. This is what we're gonna do. My old C#.net, developer, hat coming out of the closet, right? So, yeah, I would love to see that. And yeah, if you get a code review, with one of these things coming up,
could do. Yeah, could do that.
That'd be fun. A fun little challenge for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, shall we commence with the prizes?
Sure, why not?
All right, let's do it. So I have this variable called it's go time, and basically that's to allow me to show what the list looks like after I merge everything together, so nobody feels like they're being slighted. So there you are, Gregory, right there. Boom. And Dan Kitch, man, locking in the Code Ninja for 8 months. So, of course, I did say you got to be here to win. So, Richard, I mean, I understand you got stuff to do, but let me add the var. It's go time. True. Oh, what did I? There. Did I do a typo? Must have done a typo. Steve Carlson won. Okay. Well, he's not here. Steve, come on. You're on Utah time, man. All right, let's do this again. Oh, look at you. Look at that. Gregory wins. How awesome is that? All right. So let's see here. You are first winner. You take your pick. Which one do you want?
Well, I'll go with this signed copy of Mastering Terraform.
Are you for real? Oh, yeah. Well, bless your heart, man. That warmed my heart up. All right, there we go. Let's do that. All right. Let's see how long it takes us to get Dan Kitch on here. I should do Webstein.
Yeah, come on.
There we go. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So who missed out here? Webstein, you missed out, man. And then Stephen Carlson. Yeah, bummer. Next time. I'll try and do better at scheduling these more in advance. But all right, Dan Kitch, what's your pick, man?
It's got to be the Waterbottle.
There we go.
Right.
It's one of my favorites. It's a good one. It's like I don't know. It's kind of narrow, so it should fit in most car.
Nice. Nice.
And it's got a nice little handle, so keeps you safe when you're jogging at night. Somebody comes up, you just whack them over the head with it. It's pretty solid too. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to get hit with it. But anyways, cool. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a lot of fun. I'll DM you guys like to figure out like shipping and stuff like that, and all the logistics stuff. But again, thank you guys so much for your support. This was a great conversation. Had a lot of fun and learned some stuff. You guys are
Excellent.
very, very, very smart guys. So appreciate you guys spending time with me today.
Will do.
All
Be
right,
back soon.
Yeah. All right. See you guys. Cheers.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. That finishes off the first ever Azure Terraformer meetup. I'll try and do these at least once or twice a year as a thank you to those that support me and my channel. Really appreciate all those Azure Terraformers that choose to support me in that way. And if you like what I do here at the Azure Terraformer, please consider channel membership. It really helps out a lot. Anyways, that's it for me. Until next time, this is the Azure Terraformer signing off.